You know what? Android flagships, man. Just ignore all of them because it's been 3 years and still this POCO F3 performs like a beast, especially for photos when I use it with the Gcam app on the phone. But there are still areas where this phone lacks. Now let's revisit the build quality. Now looking back to using all of those thick phones, it is super refreshing to go back to a phone which has a nice slim form factor, and it made me wonder how in the world that we all got used to these bulky flagship smartphones like the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra and even the iPhone 15 Pro Max. And the matte finish at the back is still a blessing compared to something like the glossier Xiaomi 13 which I had in white. Now yes, this does not come with a wireless charger, but you know what? I would trade in a nice matte finish for any fancy glossy smartphone. Now as cliche as it sounds, it felt really great in my hands when I was using it every day, taking pictures, playing games or just confidently holding the phone in one hand. Now speaking of which, this side-mounted fingerprint sensor is still a godsend, unlocking the phone super quickly with absolutely no errors all the time. Now it is also a wonder why that POCO did not continue with this camera bump, which is super low profile not only in terms of the actual thickness but also in terms of branding, which doesn't tell the whole world that you're using a POCO phone like, look at me, look at me. Just like how the M series and the X series are, which makes you like a walking advertisement for the POCO brand. Next, let's talk about the screen. Now, if you find a phone this thin, usually there's some sort of a compromise on the screen quality. But after revisiting this phone, I didn't even notice that this is not a flagship. However, the bezels around the screen seems to tell the phone's age. But then again, smartphones like the Google Pixel 8 still have thick bezels, so that is not a complaint over here. Now, watching videos on it was still really good. And in case you have forgotten, this phone has wideband L1 playback specification on Netflix and even HDR10 playback capabilities. Now, moving away from the screen for a bit, even the stereo speakers after 3 years sounded great, with no signs of cracking where the audio is coming from, both from the bottom of the phone and at the earpiece area. Now, I'm still curious whether or not this holds speakers because I did close them and I couldn't tell the difference because the speakers on the earpiece was quite loud. Now, going back to the screen, while smartphones are currently parading a crazy amount of brightness on your phone, for this POCO F3, even at a humble 1300 nits of peak brightness, using the phone outdoors and taking videos and photos during very bright daylight was very visible. And speaking of which, let's talk about the cameras. So many of you have been saying tons of great things about using the Gcam app with the POCO F3 and how it is the best combination ever. But based on my test, that is only half the truth. So based on my extensive test, taking tons of pictures and videos during the day and night, here is my detailed comparison and conclusion. For the ultra-wide lenses, their results were the same, except for the native app is tiny bit saturated in the skies. Then the saturation remained a bit more on the main lens, and the pictures on the native app have a little more sharpness, where the grooves on the WCT building was a bit sharper. But you probably wouldn't tell a difference here on YouTube or if you post that picture on social media, and the same can be said for the zoom mode as well. Now, where the Gcam app really shines is on the rear portrait mode, where not only it has 2 focal lengths to choose from within the app, but the overall details of the background blur and the skin tones look way better than the native app. Now, another area where the Gcam app did better is in the nighttime photos, where the images was just slightly brighter, not hell of a difference, but it is there, and the Gcam app also handles highlights just a bit better. Then as for the selfie modes, if you want to have a more flawless look to your photos, then you can use the native app, as the Gcam app reveals every detail of your face, including the wrinkles on my face. Can you see it? Which is very prominent on my face in these pictures, of course. Then of course the Gcam app also has the added versatility of having 2 focal lengths to choose from in the selfie mode. So yeah, this selfie photos is based on your personal preference on what kind of a look that you would like to go with, but the native app does better on exposing the background when taking selfies, where it is darker on the Gcam app. Then it's a totally separate story when it comes to video though, because firstly, video stabilization cannot be used on the Gcam app, so the footages just suck. I'm not kidding. Check it out. Compared to the native app for video, where everything looks and performs fantastic for the rear cameras on the native app. Now, there's also a current bug where if you change to the video mode for front video, it doesn't load. So just ignore using Gcam app for video. Now software wise, as of the recording of this video, the latest update is MIUI version 14.0.11.0. Don't you just love all these decimals on MIUI software? Now the good news is that there hasn't been any issue using the phone daily. And I've also noticed that the ads have significantly dropped compared to last year, where the ads did pop up maybe once a day or maximum twice a day compared to before where it was about 4 times a day. And the bad news is that Xiaomi's latest Hyper OS won't be coming to the POCO F3. So let's hope that this MIUI continues to behave, yeah? Now the only minor thing that I had to do with certain apps like Instagram and Facebook is the fact that they automatically logged me off, and then when I tried to log in again, I couldn't even after updating the software, so I had to just uninstall and reinstall the app. Then it worked very well. Seems like a Windows problem, eh? So before we talk about the cons that this smartphone has, let's go into the gaming test. So I decided to dive straight into my regular heavy gaming test on Genshin Impact, where the ideal settings are medium, 60 FPS and motion blur turned off. And here's where it was lovely to know that the game ran smooth, with no lag at all. Even with the latest patch, it ran flawlessly even with bigger maps. Then there's no significant battery drain during long gameplay, but it did start to get warmer towards the 25th minute of gaming. And as mentioned earlier, that the phone's design made gaming on the phone significantly more comfortable for long periods of time. And just for fun, I cracked up the settings to high, and it didn't work so well. I tried. It's okay, just stick to the medium settings here. Okay, let's talk about negatives. Don't you love these topics? Got you to stay on and watch the video, right? Now, firstly, if you did stick until now, a thumbs up would be very much appreciated. And if you haven't subscribed, a subscription will be really great too. And of course, by hitting the like button, YouTube will recognize this video that this video was okay. Thank you very much once again. Now, first is overheating. And to be honest, I was expecting this to happen for 2 reasons. Now, firstly, because my friend Jeff Saleh, who has been using the POCO F3 daily, did tell me about how the phone does overheat. And based on my usage, if you take lots of videos and photos in a hotter environment, especially when you use the Gcam app, it does overheat. Then during gaming, it does become hot during long gameplay, as mentioned earlier, and this is significantly higher compared to last year. And sometimes I just leave the phone on the table, just do some stuff, and then I pick it up again, and it does feel warmer than usual. And the second reason why I expected it to overheat is that usually it happens in older generation smartphones. For example, the Xiaomi 13, which is last year, started out cool, but 1 year later it started to overheat more than usual. Now, we all can sit here and discuss for hours on why it overheats, but in general, this tends to happen with new patches of software updates to keep up with other software updates, and I personally think that was more of a software reason more than a hardware reason. Now, speaking of hardware, the only degrading issue, which is once again to be expected, is the battery. Because previously, I was getting close to 5.5 hours of screen on time daily when I was at 10% with dark mode turned on. But fast forward till now, I was only managing to get about 2.5 to 3 hours of screen on time when I was at 10% battery, which is low compared to before. Now, another thing to note is that if the POCO F3's battery totally drains, good luck trying to get it charged from 0% onwards, because if you use a non-POCO or Xiaomi charger to wake this up, it doesn't want to wake up. It says no thank you. Where it will only charge the phone on other USB-C chargers after it is about 5 to 10% battery. And yes, this also happens to other Xiaomi phones that I had to revisit too. So maybe this is why Xiaomi, Redmi and POCO include their chargers in the box, yeah? Now, speaking of taking photos and videos, one drawback is that the phone still does not do well on video at night based on these footages, which most phones these days does better over here. Next, while I did say that the phone feels great in the hands, I must stress that you must get a protective case, because the Corning Gorilla Glass 5 is almost ancient at this point of time. So if you drop the phone, halas. And while I wanted to say that the fact that the phone uses USB 2.0 on the phone was a negative, but I decided not to, since the brand new iPhone 15 has USB 2.0 and people can live with that, right? Then finally, of course, is the availability, because depending on where you're from, Good luck finding the phone brand new. For us here in Malaysia, there's no stock on online platforms like here on Lazada, but apparently it's still available in Shopee, which, don't worry, I will help you to scour the internet and put links for you in the description. Because one thing's for sure, it almost feels like generation after generation of the POCO F series release. POCO is intentionally crippling their F series release ever since the POCO F3. Because after 3 years, my friends, 3 years, the POCO F3 is still a fantastic phone, and hopefully this year when the POCO F6 is out, it could finally be a better buy than the POCO F3.